Proposals are out there, an outstanding start. Your thoughts on that?
Well, absolutely. It appears that we're on a fast track to get immigration reform finally in this country, and we've sort of overcome the political barnstorming and grandstanding that blustering that occurred before, particularly in the last election, and particularly the Republican primaries.
Be fine. Welcome back to Conklin and Company, everybody. This past week, big story coming out of the Congress and then the president making a trip to Las Vegas, kind of a campaign-style rally. Welcome back to Conklin and Company, everybody. This past week, big story coming out of the Congress and then the president making a trip to Las Vegas, kind of a campaign-style rally to talk about immigration reform. Proposals are out there. Looks like it's headed for his signature. He says if Congress can't come to terms, he'll sign the law himself. And we want to see where that is going in terms of the Farm Labor Organizing Committee. The president, the founder, is right here in Toledo, of course, and that is Baltimore Velasquez. Good to see you again, Baltimore.
Lee, good to see you.
So we have big news this week. What seemed like immigration reform had been pushed back a little bit because of the election, right. And then the fiscal cliff, the holidays, but now we have the new session of Congress, and what appears to be a coming to terms of both sets of the aisle, at least in theory. Proposals are out there, an outstanding start. And your thoughts on that?
Well, absolutely. It appears that we're on a fast track to get immigration reform finally in this country, and we've sort of overcome the political barnstorming and grandstanding that blustering that occurred before, particularly in the last election, and particularly the Republican primaries, where they demonized immigrants, and they paid a high price for that rhetoric, because the Latino vote completely punished the Republicans for that rhetoric, and I think they clearly understand that if they don't change their mind and their positions on immigration and Latinos in this country, they're going to write off that vote for the next 2 generations.
You think coming to terms is very much political, that the GOP has to garner some of that Latino vote.
Right. So they can't say no to reform now. It's going to happen.
Your thoughts on the proposals out there right now? President Obama got some criticism saying it was too vague. The devil's in the details. But your thoughts on it? Maybe explain what it could mean if it indeed does become law.
Well, what is positive, both Republicans and Democrats, highlighted by some of the most prominent Republicans right now, and particularly in the future elections, Rubio from Florida, is coming out and admitting that there has to be a road to citizenship. So there's going to be citizenship for the 12 million undocumented people in this country.
What about the workers you represent, the thousands of workers represented by the Farm Labor Organizing Committee? What does all this mean to them? Actually, I presented that case to the International Executive Council of the AFL-CIO in a call earlier today that these temporary jobs in this country, this is a very elusive part of the immigration reform because these are not full-time jobs, year-round jobs, where people have legitimate concerns that guest worker programs might come in and displace, American workers who need these jobs, and that's a legitimate concern. However, agriculture is completely different. The people we represent, you're talking about some jobs that are like 5 weeks long, harvest jobs in cucumbers, 4 to 6 weeks. And you're not going to find a person who lives here the year round depending on that kind of employment to support their families on a year-round basis. So people who get legalized in agriculture are going to find their ways to more permanent employment in order to support their families 12 months out of the year. So it's going to leave a void in that labor force that's required to pick the the food products that we enjoy on our dinner tables. So there's going to have to be a need for some kind of program to fill that temporary void, and I think that's the tricky part of this immigration reform.
Right now, the migrant farm worker is classified as what?
They're either undocumented, domestic migrant or seasonal farm worker, or they're coming to this H-2A visa, the only way you can come from Mexico to work legally in agriculture.
And we always hear, and you mentioned it, the path to citizenship.
Right.
So is the green card the next step in that?
Yes, and that's going to be made available to these 11, 12 million people here without papers, including those who are in agriculture right now. But once they get those papers, you can bet they're going to be looking for more gainful employment and other sources of the labor job market. And then it's going to leave a void in that short-term labor crops. That it's going to happen. You can review this 5, 6 years from now, and that's what we're going to see.
Part and parcel of immigration reform, we always hear about securing our borders. And we talked off the air, and you kind of scoffed at that when I mentioned that. President Obama talked about it as well. Is that catering? Is that trying to appease people on the right side on the right wing who say, hey, you got to secure the borders? Your feelings are that what?
Well, that's to assure Americans that the hysteria raised by that in the previous rhetoric about insecure borders. You have to.
Now you call it rhetoric. You don't think there's a problem?
No, it's the border is more secure now than it was from the time this immigration flow started. 15 years ago after the NAFTA agreement that gave impulse to all this immigration. Because we displaced so many people in Mexico with that NAFTA agreement. But now the border is more secure. Actually, statistics show that there's a flow of people going back to Mexico because of the lack of jobs. And the interview I did here a year or so ago with you indicated that what's coming true is what I said then, that what drives immigration in the first place is not some theoretical political initiative. It is because the natural laws of supply and demand of any market. And when the job market decreased in the United States because of the turn down in our economy, there were no jobs. So there were no jobs to migrate to. So
survival. They need to eat.
People need to eat, and so the border is more secure now than it's ever been. And all the buildup we did, the militarization we did of the border, and I think immigration reform is going to help that even more, because when people have a legal way to come back and forth across the border, they're not going to rely on paying a smuggler $3,000, $4,000 to sneak them across if they have an efficient and legal way to do it.
If President Obama says, yeah, this becomes law, in your mind, it means what for the future of this country in terms of immigration reform? What does it mean?
It means a tremendous amount of things for the people who are here without papers. Here in Toledo and in Northwest Ohio, that means the families are not going to be under the threat of being divided because they deport one family member and a mom is left there with a bunch of kids and you deport the dad, or vice versa, where the dad is here with, depending, because we have a lot of families that are mixed immigration status. The father may be legal, the mother may be legal, the other one may not be. And when the immigration deports one of them, it divides the family, it creates chaos in the family. It creates a terrible social situation in our communities, and we've had that problem here all across northern Ohio. And so this immigration reform is going to help that process, keep families together, and hopefully people don't have to be working in the shadows, working under the table with employers. And if they get their green cards, they'll have rights. They won't be afraid to report crimes. They won't be afraid to report acts of violence against them, because they don't want to expose themselves to being undocumented. They get deported while they're trying to report something that's gone wrong.
So positives all the way around, in your estimation?
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll see what happens down the road. It appears to be on the fast track right now.
Absolutely.
Immigration reform. Baltimore Velasquez,
thanks
very much for coming in. President of FLOC, the Farm Labor Organizing Committee. Take 3 on the way in just a minute.